For a few years now, the US Air Force has been working on retiring its iconic AWACS planes. You know the kind, easily recognizable with their huge 30-foot in diameter rotating radar dishes. They will be replaced by a smaller number of newer AWACS-type planes that will offer better capabilities. But this video will go beyond that. We will also look into the new radar, into why has the change in technology and numbers come about, how will the future AWACS fleet compare to China's and Russia's fleet, and just how important are AWACS-type planes today. Modern AWACS planes can often track even large ground formations from long distances. In World War II, tank usage was simpler, so to say. Today's sponsor, World of Tanks, is all about tanks. There are hundreds of tanks available in-game, from pre-war 1930 models to early Cold War. I started playing World of Tanks when it came out, but of course sometimes you take a break. Recently I've come back to it. I forgot just how much of a blast it is. I sometimes play a match at work, just long enough to relax me. But hey, when I was younger, I could do like 20 matches in a row. World of Tanks straddles that fine line between realistic and fun. There's armor penetration modeled. I have to watch how I position my tank. Where do I hide it? I have to outthink the enemy and surprise them. Yet it's action-packed and there's little downtime in matches. Blasting big heavies like the Tiger is always fun. World of Tanks is free to play, and it's gifting both new and old players. By clicking the link below this video in the description section, new players who register will get 250,000 gold, 7 days of premium access, and a Cromwell B tank. But even if you have an old account and you haven't played wargaming titles in the last 30 days, click below and you'll get 3 days of premium access, a Camoflage, and 7 days of rental of premium tank Centurion Mk or 100k compensation if you happen to already have it. For me, someone who loves to play with tanks, it's a no-brainer. Go blow up some armor behemoths. To start it all off, a very brief course on what AWACS is: Airborne Warning and Control System. The Air Force's plane finally entered service in 1977. It replaced Warning Star planes, which were in service from the 1950s. E3 AWACS improved on Warning Star quite a lot, not just by adding a much better radar, but by adding control functions. Basically, 14 operators inside the plane watch the radar screens and communicate with other planes in the skies nearby, informing them of the situation. For its time, US AWACS was quite advanced. It had a radar with a rudimentary passive electronically scanned array. It was housed in that huge rotodome, 30 feet wide and 6 feet thick. Electronic steering of the beam was done in the vertical plane, using a low number of simple shifters to determine target altitude. The whole radar dish rotates, of course. That's to cover the horizontal plane. The system completes the rotation once every 10 seconds. That's an update rate of 10 seconds. US Air Force originally ordered 34 airplanes, but the US also co-financed 18 more planes for the NATO command. Other allies bought it as well. US airframes were upgraded over the years. Capabilities for listening to enemy electronic emissions were added. Better communication systems were put in place. Everything was digitized. Even some radar hardware was changed, though the front-end stuff like the radar array itself still remained. The US AWACS fleet was largely unchanged for decades, but after a decision was made to start retiring the type and eventually replace it with a completely new plane, stuff started happening in 2023. From April to September, 12 E3 airframes have been retired and sent to Aircraft Boneyard. The US Air Force is now operating just 18 AWACS airframes. Those will be maintained for several more years, but they will be replaced by new planes, with the designation E7. They're also known as Boeing 737 Aerial Early Warning and Control planes. Some countries, like Australia and the UK, call it the Wedgetail. Originally, the Wedgetail project was designed for Australia's needs, gathering pace in the 1990s. Boeing has sold the plane to other users as well in the 2010s, and now it's selling it to the US Air Force. The entire E7 deal for the US came together quickly, signaling urgency. In 2021, various US generals publicly called for E7 to replace the E3. Commander of the Pacific Air Forces explicitly proposed the Wedgetail for his Pacific region, meaning China. By the end of 2021, the Air Force was officially asking Boeing if they could meet the Air Force's timetable. And finally, in 2022, the announcement to procure the type was made. In 2023, a contract for 26 planes was signed. With the urgency being high, the Air Force went for an off-the-shelf design. Had the Air Force gone the usual route of paying for development of a brand new system fully tailored to its future needs, that would have taken at least a decade to materialize and would have probably cost an arm and a leg. First E-7s are scheduled to be delivered to the Air Force in 2027. That's basically as quickly as possible, as 2 years are needed for Boeing to order long lead items and produce a 737 airframe. Another 2 years are needed to customize it and integrate the radar and other systems onto it. But once the first planes are in, the rest will be delivered fairly quickly. 26th plane is currently scheduled for 2032. The E-7 comes with a Boeing 737, unlike the much older 707 for the AWACS. The airframe difference is noticeable, as the 737 is half the weight. There is a small penalty in range, as the 737 simply doesn't carry as much fuel, even though its engines are newer and more fuel efficient. But given the US is often relying on in-air refueling for its AWACS missions as it is, it's not really an issue. While the Wedgetail may need a refueling a bit sooner, it will also spend half as much fuel. Also, the radar structure on Wedgetail is tailored for higher altitude operations, possibly over 5,000 feet higher than the E-3. That alone might increase theoretical range against low-flying targets by some 20 miles. The big change, of course, is the radar. The iconic rotating dish is gone. In its place, a structure that doesn't move. It uses actively electronically scanned arrays, or active phased arrays. Basically, those scan left and right, up and down, without any need for the radar's housing structure to move. There are limits, of course. While active phased arrays can still be quite useful even at extreme angles, more so than passive phased arrays, they still can't maintain function when much farther away than 60 degrees off their main axis. E-7 uses two large 11 feet long radar arrays in its main structure. Those cover roughly 240 degrees around the plane. The remaining 60 degrees forward and to the rear are covered by separate smaller arrays on top of the big arrays. Those aren't as capable and serve mostly to keep the air picture up to date during the moments the plane's main arrays might be looking elsewhere. AWACS-type planes usually fly 8-shaped patterns, as they're often needed to persist over a single area. The big array is, however, quite potent. Curiously, it operates in the L-band, which is a lower radar band than what E-3 operates in. Said band offers less resolution and is somewhat less precise, but given that the whole hardware and software behind it is more advanced than what E-3 had, the overall impact might be negligible. The benefit of using the L-band is that it's less power demanding, and it's better against stealthy targets, meaning it should detect a Chinese J-20 fighter from somewhat longer distances. The biggest change is, of course, the radar's persistence. The old radar rotated around and the operator was just fed with whatever data it gathered. The new system enables the operator to task the radar. For example, the radar might be set to watch and could report a faint signal hundreds of miles away. An operator inside the plane could then task the radar to focus its power and resources onto that spot for a short while, so more details and information are gathered. Another operator could be listening to enemy signal emissions being gathered by the array at the same time. Instead of one update every 10 seconds, the E-7 will likely be doing dozens of updates per second. Old AWACS had a fairly rudimentary airborne moving target indicator system, which the new E-7 radar greatly improves. The AMTI mode, which brings detailed, precise and almost continuous info on targets, is one of E-7's best selling points. Australian and British articles also sometimes mentioned ground-moving target indicators when talking about Wedgetail. While it's still a little ambiguous whether E-7 has it, it's very likely ground target surveillance has been improved as well. Old AWACS had no GMTI mode and had big issues with ground clutter, but modern airborne radars have largely solved those issues. Swedish Global Eye AWACS-like system has been touted as being able to track jet skis on the sea at over 200 miles away. That's tracking, not just detection. It's perfectly plausible the E-7's radar performance is just as good, if not better. There are various possible configurations for operator stations inside E-7. While US configuration isn't known yet, if it follows the UK one, it will feature 10 operator consoles. Now, before we go on, allow us half a minute to ask you to subscribe. Yes, you hear that all the time from YouTubers, but it really can make the difference. If you truly like our content, subscribe, hit the like button, press the notification bell too. All that will help our channel chug along. Anyway, on to the video. So why the change? Couldn't the new radar be integrated into older planes? Theoretically, yes, but that would have cost more. Wedgetail was a ready developed program, which the US Air Force will take without too many changes. Most changes haven't been published yet, but it's likely communications equipment, electronics, emissions listening suite, and the defense suite that will be to the US standards. A big improvement explicitly demanded by the US is a switch to open mission software. While other older E7 users can't quickly change software as they need to rely on the manufacturer, the US Air Force will be able to modify the software and databases quickly. That refers both to enemy signal signatures as well as to radar modes. Backend processing is always advancing, so one may get better results with newer software. A big drive for change was the fact that old rotodome radars were simply not competitive anymore. General Wilsbach, commander of US Pacific Air Forces, said E3 isn't capable in a 21st century fight. It would not be very useful in a fight against China, for example. But besides all the capabilities that the new radar offers, another big reason is that old 707 planes are simply hard to maintain today. They are 50 years old, their engines are old, mission availability rate was recently some 60% and dropping. The Air Force said they're having issues sourcing replacement parts. So even if a forward deployed unit may have 5 AWACSs ready to monitor skies around Taiwan, for example, in practice only 3 planes may be actually capable of taking off and performing a mission without a delay on any given day. The E7 is a huge step up there. Being based on 737NG, its maintenance should be much easier, as there are some 6,000 of those flying around the world. Retiring over a dozen E3s will save close to $3 billion over 5 years. It will free up 1,500 airmen. Those will be able to switch to E7 training sooner, and the funds will enable easier and quicker E7 procurement. But to get back to that China factor, why is E7 important there? China is making the stealthy J-20 fighter, apparently getting close to adding 100 such fighters per year. It's test flying another stealth fighter, the J-35, to enter service soon. It's developing a stealthy flying wing bomber, similar to B-2. While the exact stealth levels of those planes may be argued over, they are sure to give old hardware on today's AWACSs a very hard time. Furthermore, China has been fielding very long-range anti-air missiles. Their PL-15 is a modern AMRAAM equivalent, plausibly reaching over 120 miles in range, potent enough that it spurred the US force on a crash course development of the AMRAAM's successor. China also has a big missile bigger than the old US Phoenix, sometimes referred to as PL-17. It apparently entered service recently. Given its size, its radar seeker may be quite capable, and the range could plausibly be in the 200 to 250 mile bracket. So the E3 might have issues detecting threats directly to itself, let alone to friendlies flying in front of it. The E7 is there to help with that and give the Air Force a modern AWACS-type platform. How the E7 might fare against stealthy threats remains to be seen, as it largely depends on exact stealth levels of the adversaries. While fleet-to-fleet comparisons are not very important, as AWACS-type planes will not be actually out-AWACSing one another, let us still say that the 26 airframe-strong future US E7 fleet is outnumbered by the current Chinese AWACS-type fleet, which numbers roughly 60 planes. But the US Air Force doesn't fight alone. Besides other allies like Japan and Australia, a very important addition to E7 capabilities are the Navy's E2 aerial early warning planes. They are smaller and less capable than the E7, but they have a token command capability as well, and their radar is just as advanced, trading precision for even better anti-stealth characteristics, as it works in the UHF band. Said band has a much easier time spotting features on tactical-sized jets, even if they're stealth jets like the J-20. And curiously, while everyone in the West has been cutting numbers of their AWACS planes, including the US Air Force, NATO Command and the UK, the US Navy has remained steady. That too signals the importance of the Pacific theater to the US. In a way, the E-2D may be a more important asset to the US against China than the E-7. E-7 was always envisioned as an E-3 replacement, and E-3's main mission was the Soviets. As Russian capabilities diminished over the decades, it's not strange that the European theater AWACS-type planes are not that plentiful. Russia too dropped the number of its AWACS-like planes. They currently operate 7 to 9 A-50U planes, which feature fairly modernized radars. All the other Soviet-era A-50 airframes have been retired. Finally, how important is an AWACS-type plane today? In a sense, it's less important than it was 30 years ago. It's still a big target which has little chance of escaping a missile if the enemy manages to get close. And with the proliferation of stealthy fighters, those chances are ever increasing. Advanced radars and attempts to use specific radar bands help alleviate the problem, but they may not really solve it. In addition, sensors on other tactical planes have been getting better over the decades. While an F-35 can't look in all directions all the time, and while it can't stay airborne for as long as an AWACS can, it can offer much better situational awareness than an F-15 could 30 years ago. And due to ever better interconnectivity, hundreds of jets that might be flying around China at any one time may be sharing their radar data with the command, helping synthesize a wider and better image of the battlefield than what 1990s tech was able to, even with the AWACSs of the day. Finally, there's the satellite factor. More and more the US is testing sensor-equipped satellite flocks to actually do the ground-moving target indicator missions. That's just a step away from doing the same for airborne targets. That may help explain why the US did not go all in on some super expensive, super capable E-3 replacement, but settled on an off-the-shelf, it's good enough solution that the E-7 is. The long-term future of expensive dedicated AWACS platforms may be in question as it is. Before we go, just a quick reminder, World of Tanks is giving gifts to both new players and returning players. Just click the link in the video description. Detailed list of benefits is also present there. Have fun and make some tanks burn! And remember, Binkov may talk about war, but only real peace can bring us all together.